Welcome to Eerie Shadow. I'm Annie, and I've always been a little too curious for my own good. Growing up, my friends and I used to dive into all kinds of strange challenges. The type you find on YouTube or TikTok. Things like trying to stay in a haunted house overnight, or seeing who can last the longest playing creepy games in the dark. The type of challenges that, in the moment, seemed more funny than dangerous. But after what happened with the Whisper Challenge, I can't look at these kinds of viral dares the same way again. What I thought was a harmless game turned into a nightmare. It all started on a lazy Saturday evening, a few weeks after I moved into my own apartment. I had been feeling disconnected, you know? The thrill of living independently had worn off, and now it was just me, my laptop, and the flickering overhead lights. I hadn't really made many friends in the area yet. My social circle consisted of online interactions, which often included my best friend, Lisa, and the occasional random encounter with strangers on social media. Lisa and I had known each other since high school. She was my go-to person for everything, the one who would listen to my rants about work, my musings about life, and my random interests. We'd always shared a mutual love for strange things, ghost stories, unexplained phenomena, and most importantly, viral internet challenges. And that's how we found ourselves in this mess. The Whisper Challenge was everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Everyone was doing it. The premise was simple. One person wears noise-canceling headphones, and the other whispers something to them. The person with the headphones has to guess what the whisper is. So, naturally, we decided to try it out. I set up my camera, trying to get the perfect angle for the video. My small apartment was quiet, the only sound coming from the occasional hum of the refrigerator. The walls were thin, and the place always felt a little too empty, too silent, especially at night. Lisa had suggested doing it over a video call. She was at her place, and I was at mine. So I texted her to say, "Are you ready?" And within seconds, she appeared on the screen. "Ready when you are," she said, flashing a grin. "All right. You first," I asked. She nodded, her eyes dancing with excitement. Lisa had always loved being the first to start things. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, adjusting them until I couldn't hear anything, not even the sound of my own breathing. Lisa began whispering, but I couldn't hear her. All I could see was her lips moving. I leaned forward, trying to read her expression, guessing. My fingers itched to guess, to get it right, but it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. Finally, after a few seconds, I wrote something down. "Is it I love pizza?" I guessed. Lisa burst into laughter. "No, but you're close." We continued playing, and I was having fun. The lighthearted mood was exactly what I needed. A break from the world outside my apartment. But then, it happened. I had just asked Lisa to whisper something when I heard it, faint, at first, like a rustling sound from the corner of my room. I figured it was the wind or the pipes creaking. But then it came again, closer this time. "Annie," I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. The voice wasn't Lisa's. It wasn't even a whisper, it was more like a raspy, breathless murmur coming from somewhere across the room. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Lisa looked confused. "Hear what?" I thought I heard someone. whispering my name, she laughed. "Annie, don't freak out. You're just hearing things. It's the game." But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't imagining it. I took off my headphones and stood up, walking cautiously toward the corner where the sound had come from. The room felt heavier now, the air thick with an unexplainable tension. There was no one there, just shadows cast by the dim lights and the faint hum of electronics. "Lisa," I whispered, feeling the cold creeping up my spine. "Something's wrong." After that, I tried to dismiss it. Maybe I had just imagined it. I mean, what were the odds that something was in my apartment with me, right? I sat back down, put the headphones back on, and got back into the game. But as Lisa whispered the next phrase, the sound came again, this time clearer. "Annie, come closer." I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was no longer a whisper coming from my side of the room. It was behind me, echoing in the empty space. "Lisa, I swear I'm hearing something," I said, now fully unnerved. "This isn't funny." "Annie, stop," Lisa said, her tone turning serious. "It's just the game. You're scaring yourself. Just finish the challenge, okay?" But I couldn't focus anymore. Something wasn't right. I felt an overwhelming urge to check the rest of my apartment. Every corner, every closet, every shadow. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me down the hallway, then back into the living room. My heart was racing, and I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't just a sound now. It was a presence. Something or someone was there with me, whispering, watching me. I returned to my living room, shaking, and sat down in front of the camera again. Lisa was still on the screen, but she didn't seem to notice how pale I was. "Just finish the game, Annie," she urged, her face appearing blurry from my blurred vision. I nodded, barely hearing her. My mind was consumed with the noise I'd heard, the voice, the whispers. Before I could say anything, I heard it again. This time, louder. "Annie." The voice came from the corner of my room, clear and distinct, just like before. But this time, I didn't feel the cold dread. I felt an overwhelming need to answer it. I moved to the corner, my breath shallow. I didn't even think twice. "What do you want?" I whispered, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. The response was chilling. "I'm waiting." The voice sounded so close, like it was standing right next to me. But when I looked around, there was nothing there. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair as I scrambled to get away. I quickly unplugged my headphones, but the room felt suffocating, like something was closing in on me. The screen went black as Lisa's call dropped. I hadn't even noticed until then how much I was shaking. The minutes stretched on after the call ended, but I was still frozen in place, staring at the empty screen. I felt wrong, like something was still there, lingering just out of view, waiting. I shakily closed my laptop, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. It was probably nothing, right? Just a weird glitch or an overactive imagination. I tried to tell myself that, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The voice, the way it had called my name, it wasn't just a noise. It was deliberate, and it was real. I sat there in silence for a long time, my mind running in circles. The apartment felt too quiet now, like the walls were pressing in on me. I got up and walked through the rooms, checking every corner, opening every closet, looking behind every door. Of course, there was nothing there. Nothing except the mess I hadn't cleaned up earlier. I tried calling Lisa back, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, but she never responded. She'd been online just an hour ago, but after the call dropped, she went quiet. Maybe she was busy, or maybe she just didn't know what to make of my frantic message. I didn't know if I'd sound crazy to her, so I didn't mention the voice. I didn't mention the chill that had crept into my bones, or the way it felt like something had shifted in the room with me. I lay in bed that night, the covers pulled tight around me, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The whispers I'd heard echoed in my ears. They weren't just in my head. I wasn't imagining it. I could still hear them now, soft and low, like someone was just beyond my reach. I tried to ignore them. I told myself that I was just exhausted, that I'd let my mind get carried away. But that didn't stop the fear from crawling up my spine, settling into my chest. The next few days passed in a blur. I went to work, came home, and went through the motions. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I didn't want to go to sleep. But eventually, exhaustion took over, and I'd fall into a fitful rest, only to wake up to the sound of something whispering my name in the dark. The apartment felt like a prison. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one. That's the thought that kept gnawing at me as the days turned into weeks. What if someone else had heard the same whisper? What if someone else had experienced the same bizarre, terrifying phenomenon? There had to be someone, right? Someone who could explain this, who could tell me that I wasn't losing my mind. I told myself I wouldn't keep running from it. I couldn't live with the whispers lingering just beyond my reach forever. I needed answers. So I started looking, researching, reading through forums, scouring social media, anything that might provide some sort of explanation or, at the very least, make me feel less alone. I began with the obvious places. Google searches, YouTube, Reddit threads. People share everything online, right? The more I dug into it, the more I felt like I was unraveling a thread I couldn't pull back. It started with the Whisper Challenge. I had found a few old threads, casual discussions about the challenge that had been popular a few years ago. People would post videos of themselves playing the game, where you try to guess what the person is whispering through noise-canceling headphones. It was a harmless, fun thing, a challenge people would share to make each other laugh. But the deeper I dug, the more unsettling details I uncovered. On one Reddit thread, titled "Strange Happenings During the Whisper Challenge," someone had posted a comment that made my blood run cold. It wasn't the kind of thing anyone would expect in a thread about a silly game. The post read, "I played the Whisper Challenge with my friends last week. It was all fun and games until something strange happened. At one point, I heard a voice, not my friend's, but someone else's. The voice whispered my name, clear as day. It sounded like they were right next to me. I thought I was just hearing things, but then my friend swore they hadn't said anything. I thought I was just stressed or tired, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't just in my head. It was real." I froze. My hands trembled as I read those words over and over again, my eyes wide. This was it. Someone else had experienced what I had. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't just stress. I clicked on the username, hoping to see if this person had shared any follow-up posts. I needed to know more. The post was from a few years ago, but the user still had a recent activity log. With a growing sense of dread, I scrolled through their comments, looking for anything that could explain what happened to them after the incident. But nothing stood out. There was no follow-up, no indication of what happened next. I left a reply, asking for more details, but I wasn't hopeful. My anxiety grew as I stared at the screen. Was I reaching out to someone who had experienced the same kind of terror I had? Or was I just clinging to a thread of hope that I wasn't alone in this? The next few days were a blur. I spent hours every night scouring online communities, searching for anyone who had shared a similar experience. I joined every thread I could find, posted questions, and even reached out to people directly. No one had an answer. No one had any kind of explanation, but I did find something else. Something that sent a fresh wave of panic through me. One comment in a thread titled Unexplainable Voices and the Whisper Challenge mentioned something that I couldn't ignore. It was posted by someone named Wraith Walker, who had written, "It's not just the game. It's not just a random glitch. Once you open that door, it doesn't close. You'll hear them, and they'll hear you. I've been trying to figure out how to stop it for months. I don't think I can anymore." I clicked on their profile, hoping to see more, but the page was locked. There were no other posts, no way to reach out. My stomach turned. What did they mean? You'll hear them, and they'll hear you. The words felt like a warning, like the last words of someone who had finally lost the battle. That night, I lay awake, my phone in my hands. I couldn't stop thinking about Wraith Walker's message. The idea that I had somehow invited something in when I participated in the Whisper Challenge seemed to make sense, but it also terrified me more than anything else. I had opened a door to something I couldn't understand, something that was now following me. I didn't know how to close it, or if I even could. I didn't sleep much that night. I couldn't. I kept thinking about the voice, the whisper I had heard on the call, the chill that had settled into my bones. It wasn't just a trick of the mind. It was something more, something I couldn't escape. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I told myself that it was just the stress of everything, just the pressure of work, the sleepless nights, the endless scrolling through online forums. But deep down, I knew better. I had opened something, and now it was with me. I couldn't unsee the comments, the posts. I couldn't undo what I'd done. There was no way to take back the invitation and the whispers. They hadn't stopped. They had only gotten louder. Weeks passed, and I moved. I found a new place, a smaller one, but at least it was different, away from the apartment where everything had gone wrong. I told myself it would help, that a change of scenery might break whatever was haunting me. But the whispers didn't stop. I couldn't explain it, but they followed me. I'm still trying to convince myself that it's just stress or sleep deprivation, but deep down, I know it's more than that. I haven't picked up my phone in days. I don't want to see that video again, don't want to hear the whispering through the headphones, or replay the moment when everything changed. Every time I try, I hear that same voice, clear as day, calling my name from the other side of the room. I hear it when I'm alone. I hear it when I'm awake. I hear it in the silence, always just behind me. I haven't spoken to Lisa since that night. I don't know what to say to her. She still hasn't called me back, and I've stopped reaching out. I don't want to pull her into this. If I'm being honest, I don't want anyone to know how much I'm struggling with it. I don't want anyone to think I've lost my mind. But the truth is, I don't feel like myself anymore. Something changed after that night. I'm not sure if it's the apartment, the challenge, or just my own fear. But I'm different. I feel like I'm being followed. Like I'm always just one step behind whatever is whispering my name. I don't think I'll ever be able to explain it, and I don't think I'll ever find peace. I just try to get by, to ignore the creeping terror in my mind, but I know it's still there. Waiting, maybe one day I'll find the courage to confront it, maybe even listen to the recording again. But for now, I'm too afraid. Afraid of what I'll hear, and more afraid of what might hear me. The whispers are still there, and somehow, I know they always will be. I never believed in things like haunted tech or creepy electronics. To me, it seemed like something straight out of a bad horror movie. But that was before Lily came into our lives. the first time I heard about the baby monitor, it was just a recommendation. One of those, every parent needs this kinds of things. I was a first-time mom, and anything that promised to give me peace of mind was something I'd consider. My husband, Matt, wasn't as convinced. He thought we'd be fine with a basic model. We didn't need anything fancy, but when we received the monitor as a gift at the baby shower, we figured we'd try it out. It was from Matt's old college friend, Daniel. He had been living in the city for years and seemed to be doing well for himself. He had even bought a fancy new house and invited us over to see it once Lily was born. The monitor itself was a sleek, high-tech device. It looked like something straight out of a sci-fi film, with a camera that could swivel around and a monitor that displayed live footage of the baby's room. At the time, I thought it was a nice gesture, even if a little over the top. We didn't know Daniel well enough to know what kind of gift giver he was, but I'd seen him post online about his new life and all the high-tech gadgets he'd been buying. It made sense he'd pick something this elaborate. We set the monitor up in Lily's room and left it on the nightstand beside her crib. The first few days were blissful. We could watch her every move from the comfort of our bed, even when she was just sleeping. It felt reassuring. The camera's lens would gently zoom in and out, adjusting to her every move. It was like a silent guardian keeping watch. But then something strange happened. Late one night, maybe a week after we'd set up the monitor, I woke up with a start. It was an odd sensation, like I wasn't alone, but not in the typical way you'd feel when someone is standing next to you. It was a deeper, more instinctual fear, like being watched by something that shouldn't be there. I tried to shake off the feeling, but then I heard it. The static crackling from the monitor wasn't just the usual white noise anymore. There was something else, like a faint whisper behind it. I sat up in bed, the covers tangled around my legs. "Matt," I whispered, but he was already asleep, his steady breathing filling the room. I glanced at the baby monitor on the nightstand. The camera, for the first time, wasn't facing Lily. It was tilted slightly to the left, directed directly at the crib. My heart raced as I pulled the monitor closer to me. I could see Lily, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully as she slept, but the camera, it was wrong. It shouldn't have moved. It was supposed to be fixed. I checked the settings on the device, wondering if I had accidentally pressed something, but the camera was still set to its default position. I shrugged it off, blaming it on my exhaustion. Maybe I had adjusted it myself earlier without realizing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something had changed in the air, and it wasn't just the monitor. It was only the next night when things escalated further. The monitor's usual static hum filled the room once more, but this time, the voice came. It was faint at first, almost like someone was speaking through a wall. "Why don't you pick her up?" I froze. I had heard about these things, about how certain devices could pick up signals from nearby radio frequencies, or even strange interference from other electronics. It had to be that. Nothing more, but the voice. The voice didn't sound like interference. It sounded human. I glanced nervously at the baby monitor and then at Lily, who was fast asleep. I had to admit I was uneasy. The monitor was supposed to be a tool for reassurance, but now it felt like an unwelcome presence in the room. Still, I tried to convince myself it was just a glitch. Maybe the monitor was picking up signals from someone else's system, or maybe it was the wind carrying strange sounds through the walls. But when I listened closely, I heard the voice again. "Pick her up." The words echoed in the empty room, low and almost intimate. I didn't even think twice. I picked up the monitor and quickly checked the settings again, making sure everything was in order. The camera was facing Lily now, and the sound was back to its usual static hum. It seemed harmless enough, so I let it go. It was probably just the baby monitor's weird quirks. But the voice lingered in my mind. A few days later, after several more bizarre occurrences where the monitor picked up strange sounds and whispers, I decided to do some research. I was no longer comfortable with the idea that this high-tech baby monitor could be malfunctioning so consistently. I started by looking up the brand online, only to find something unsettling. The product had been recalled years ago due to a defect. According to the forums and review sites, the issue was related to the monitor's frequency range, which allowed it to accidentally pick up signals from outside sources. But something about the recall felt off, like the people who bought the monitors were never fully informed of what else the product might be capable of. Then, on one obscure thread in a parenting forum, I found a mention of something even more chilling. One parent wrote about a similar experience, claiming they'd received a baby monitor from an old friend. The same model. At first, it was harmless, just strange noises here and there, some odd static. But then the voice started. At first, it spoke like a soft whisper, but the messages gradually became clearer and more personal. "Where's your baby?" The post was from someone named Claire, and she mentioned that her monitor came from a family friend too. The more I read, the more I felt a gnawing sense of dread in my gut. The monitor, the whispers, the voices, they weren't just random malfunctions. And then, as I continued reading through Claire's account, I froze. She mentioned a single, chilling detail. After the voice started, we began seeing things. In our house, we tried to ignore it, but that was a mistake. I stopped reading right there. I tried to push it all out of my mind. I didn't want to believe that this high-tech device could be anything more than a malfunctioning piece of equipment. But then it happened again. The voice, louder this time. "Don't ignore me." I jumped from the couch, my pulse quickening. Lily was in her crib upstairs, and Matt was in the next room, too far away to hear it. I grabbed the baby monitor and rushed to her room, my hands trembling. The static was overwhelming now, like a broken radio. The voice, though, was so clear. "Why won't you answer me?" I turned around, heart pounding in my chest. My breath caught in my throat, and there in the corner of the room was the shadow. It didn't look human, but it was there, in the dark. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to shake off what had happened in Lily's room. I tried to tell myself it was just exhaustion, a bad dream that somehow bled into reality. But every night when I lay in bed, I couldn't escape the echo of that voice, the voice that had been so clear, so demanding. I thought about the thread I had read, the warning Claire had left behind. We tried to ignore it, but that was a mistake. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how right she was. I had tried to convince myself that it was just a technical issue, static, interference, a weird glitch in the system. But what if it was something more? What if the monitor had somehow become a portal, a bridge to something else? I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know more about this device, about what was happening. So, late one night, when Matt was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and scrolled through every single detail I could find about that baby monitor. The more I dug, the more I began to feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was something off about the reviews. Most of them were overly positive, almost too perfect. No complaints, no issues. It felt like an ad campaign, but it was buried so deep in the comments that I almost missed it. One review, buried beneath dozens of glowing praises, had been posted by someone anonymous. They told me it was just a monitor, but it wasn't. It's been months since we threw it out, but I still hear the voice sometimes. The chills that ran down my spine felt like ice. I stared at the screen, unable to blink, unable to look away. The next night, Lily slept soundly in her crib, and I tried to get some rest myself, but the silence in the house was deafening. I kept hearing the hum of the monitor in the other room, even when it wasn't on. It was like it was constantly there, watching. I got up from bed, my legs stiff from lying down too long, and I went to check on Lily. I needed to know she was still okay. I needed to reassure myself that it was all just a figment of my imagination, a result of sleep deprivation. As I passed the hallway, I glanced at the baby monitor on the dresser. The camera wasn't facing Lily, it was facing the door. The lens stared directly into the hallway, pointed right at me. My breath caught in my throat. There was no way the camera could have moved on its own. It had been fixed in place since the day we set it up. I hesitated, the cold air of the hallway creeping under my skin. The sound of static from the monitor filled the silence, but there was no voice this time. No whisper, just the crackling hum. My heart raced as I slowly reached for the monitor, not knowing what I expected to find. I pulled it closer to my face, staring at the screen. At first, I saw nothing, just the empty hallway. But then, the shadow moved. It was a fleeting movement, so quick I almost thought I had imagined it. The shadow, just at the edge of the screen, lingered for only a second before vanishing into the darkness. The monitor screen flickered. The shadow was gone. I stumbled back, clutching the monitor like it was a lifeline. What had I just seen? My pulse thundered in my ears as I turned and rushed to Lily's room. But when I opened the door, I was greeted by the soft, reassuring sound of her breathing. She was okay. She was safe. But I knew, deep down, that something wasn't right. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. The voice came again the next night, louder this time. "Why don't you check the camera?" I could hardly breathe. I knew this was it. This was the point where I couldn't back away anymore. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just some malfunction. The voice was real. The monitor, whatever it was becoming more sinister with each passing night. The static filled the room, followed by the voice. "Check the camera. It's watching you." I tried to rationalize it. I tried to tell myself it was some strange interference, that this was some kind of high-tech flaw. But the more I tried to reason with myself, the more I could feel the pressure building. I had to check. I had to understand. I rushed to Lily's room, my hands trembling as I picked up the baby monitor. The camera was once again pointing at the hallway, not at her crib. I felt the sweat trickling down the back of my neck as I stepped closer, trying to fight the urge to run away from the creeping fear that threatened to consume me. I glanced back at Lily. She was fine, still peacefully sleeping, but the monitor wasn't showing her. It was showing the hallway again, and then the whisper came. "Look behind you." I froze. The words hung in the air like a sinister omen. Look behind me. I was already facing the door. I turned slowly, the fear crawling through me like ice, making my spine stiff. The room was dark, but there was something off. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was there, just beyond the edge of the hallway. Watching, the more I thought about it, the more I understood. The voice, the shadow, the camera that kept moving. It was all connected. But what did it want? Why was it happening? What was this device really capable of? I spent the next few days researching everything I could about the brand and the model of the baby monitor. I dug deeper into the forums, scouring the internet for any trace of other people who had experienced something similar. The truth, as it turned out, was much darker than I could have imagined. The baby monitor had a dark history, one that was buried deep. Apparently, a few years ago, it had been linked to a series of mysterious events. Families who had bought the product began reporting strange occurrences, all tied to the same model. At first, the company had tried to sweep it under the rug, dismissing it as a glitch. But then, people started to vanish. People who had used the monitor. The more I read, the more I realized that the voice wasn't just random static or a technical fault. It was something else. Something that had been deliberately hidden. A voice that had been calling out to the most vulnerable. The monitor had been tampered with. But the worst part, it was already too late to turn back. I could hardly believe what I was reading, but the facts were undeniable. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the baby monitor was not a simple device. It was connected to something far darker, far more sinister. The voice on the other end, the chilling presence I felt watching me, it wasn't some random glitch. It was a deliberate intrusion into my life. I tried to convince myself I was wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my fear was driving me to see things that weren't there. But every time I picked up the monitor, every time I heard that voice, the rational thoughts slipped further and further away. That night, as I lay in bed, the house eerily silent except for the occasional creak of the floorboards, I heard it again. The same static, the same whisper. Only this time it wasn't a question, it was a command. Come to the room. Now. I sat up, my heart racing. Was I hearing things? Was this a dream? It felt too real. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I stared at the baby monitor on the nightstand. It had been quiet all evening, but now it was alive with a soft hum. A warning. The static seemed to increase, like a signal struggling to break through. Then the voice again, clearer this time. You'll never be able to protect her. I bolted upright, panic swelling in my chest. Lily was in the next room, asleep in her crib. The voice, it was coming from that device. The baby monitor. The device that was supposed to protect her, not put her in danger. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed the monitor, hands trembling, and rushed to Lily's room. The door creaked open. Lily was sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the horror that had gripped me. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding my veins. But the monitor in my hands, it felt heavy. Heavier than it ever had before. I held it up, the screen glowing faintly in the darkness. It was a small comfort, but it was enough. But then, the camera moved. I couldn't breathe. I had just checked the camera. I knew it had been aimed at her crib. Now it was pointing toward the corner of the room, toward the closet. The shadow seemed to grow in that corner, impossibly deep, a dark presence that filled the screen. My body went cold. It was then that I realized, what if the camera wasn't just moving on its own? What if it was being controlled? I gripped the monitor harder, as if trying to keep whatever was in that room from crossing the line between the monitor's screen and the reality in front of me. The voice came again, this time without any preamble, without any static. Look inside the closet. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew I had to check. I knew it. But I couldn't. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, like something was pressing against me from every side. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and run, to grab Lily and just flee, get out of this house. But my feet were frozen to the floor. The voice wasn't letting me leave. It was holding me in place, a tether stronger than any fear. It was impossible to resist. I turned slowly, every nerve on edge. My eyes fell to the closet door. It was closed, but something about it, something about the way the darkness bled out from the edges, made it seem wrong. I could almost hear the soft, scratching sound, faint but distinct, coming from behind the door. Without thinking, I walked toward the closet. I felt every step as if I were wading through quicksand. My body screamed at me to stop, to turn around, but I couldn't. I reached for the door handle, my hand shaking uncontrollably. The handle turned easily under my grip, and with a breath that I didn't even realize I was holding, I pulled the door open. Nothing. The closet was empty, the shelves lined with old clothes and toys, forgotten remnants of a past life. Nothing was there, no creature, no monster, just the clothes swaying ever so slightly in the breeze. I let out a shaky laugh, a mix of relief and disbelief. I had imagined it, I thought. The fear had taken hold of me, and I had let my mind run wild. It was just a closet, nothing to fear. But then, I heard it, the soft click of the monitor. The static rose up, louder this time, almost deafening. And then the voice. "You shouldn't have looked." I spun around. The room was empty. Lily was still asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Something was there now, just beyond the threshold of the crib, watching me. I could almost feel it, this presence, this unnatural weight pressing down on me, as though something had crossed over from the monitor to reality. The days after that felt like I was walking through a haze. I was losing touch with what was real, with what was sane. Every time I walked past the baby monitor, I could feel it watching me, listening to me. The voice never went away. It was in my head, in my dreams, in the very air around me. Matt noticed, of course. He could tell something was wrong, but he was still skeptical. He'd checked the monitor himself, and aside from the occasional static, everything seemed fine. But it wasn't fine. It wasn't just a glitch. The camera was moving, and the voice, it was still there. One night, when I couldn't take it anymore, I decided to take the monitor apart. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening. I found the screws at the base of the monitor and twisted them free, feeling a sense of determination surge through me. The back panel came off with a sharp click, exposing the wires and tiny internal components. My fingers trembled as I worked, but I didn't stop. I was close now. When the panel came off, I stared inside. The motherboard was burned in places, and one of the small wires had been snipped, as if someone or something had tampered with it. My heart raced. This wasn't a defect. This wasn't a malfunction. The monitor had been hacked. Before I could make sense of it, I heard it again. The voice, clear and cold. "You shouldn't have done that." I froze. I knew what was coming. I had been warned. The whisper followed me like a shadow as I backed away from the monitor. I felt the walls of the room close in, the air turning ice cold. And then, before I could even react, the lights went out. The sudden darkness enveloped the room, and I froze. My breath hitched in my chest. The kind of cold that wasn't from the absence of light, but from something far more sinister seemed to wrap around me, suffocating me. I reached for my phone, the only light in the room, and it flickered weakly in my grasp. It wasn't enough. I can't breathe. I can't see. The stillness in the room felt like a pressure I couldn't escape. I knew Lily was still asleep in her crib, but my senses were telling me she wasn't alone. There was something else in the room with us now. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. I held my breath, trying to listen for something, anything. But there was nothing. The whisper came again, and this time it was louder, almost a hiss. "Don't look at me." I swallowed hard, fear choking me. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to grab Lily and flee the house. But my feet were glued to the floor. My fingers trembled as I reached for the baby monitor, still on the floor where I'd left it after attempting to take it apart. The static crackled violently, as though something was fighting to break through. I reached down for it, heart hammering. As I lifted it, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread. Something in the air had shifted. The energy in the room felt wrong. It was as though the room had grown colder, denser. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an unnatural frequency. I pressed the button to turn the monitor back on. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, a figure. At first, I thought it was a glitch, but then it moved, slowly, unnaturally. Its head tilted at an angle, the way a bird might twist its neck to look at something from a different perspective. My stomach churned at the sight. The figure on the screen was distorted, its features barely visible through the static, but the eyes were unmistakable. They were too wide, too far apart, and the grin that spread across its face was something no human could make. I gasped, stumbling back, the monitor slipping from my hands and crashing to the floor. My eyes couldn't look away from the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. The room was silent now, except for the faint hum of the monitor. "You shouldn't have looked." I heard it again, this time not from the monitor, but from behind me, a whisper, so close to my ear that I felt the breath on my skin. I spun around, but no one was there. I was alone. No. My thoughts were jumbled. I was losing it, losing myself. This couldn't be real. This had to be some terrible nightmare that my brain was conjuring up to deal with the stress. I had to wake up. I had to snap out of this. But Lily's soft breathing, the warmth of her presence, was the only comfort I had left. I had to protect her. I had to get her out of here. I reached down and grabbed the baby monitor from the floor, the plastic cracked from the fall, and slammed it back together. The screen was still showing that same figure. It was closer now. I could see its outline more clearly, its limbs long and angular, almost too thin. The grin was wide, unnaturally wide. I could feel the hair on my neck stand up as I took a step back. The figure moved closer, its head still tilted at that strange angle. And then, it smiled. The corners of its mouth stretched farther, too far, as though the skin itself was pulling apart to reveal teeth too sharp and too many. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. This wasn't just a figure on a screen anymore. This wasn't a glitch. The thing, it was in the room with me, watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. And then, with a jolt that made my heart lurch, the thing on the monitor raised one long, bony finger and pointed directly at me. "I'm right behind you." I turned around. The room was empty, but it wasn't. The closet door was slightly ajar now, a crack in the darkness. A shadow slithered out from the crack and crept along the floor, pooling beneath the crib. I couldn't move. My feet felt like they were stuck in cement. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then the whisper came again, only this time it was louder, more urgent. "Don't leave her alone." I snapped. I grabbed Lily from the crib and cradled her close to me, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. My heart raced as I backed toward the door, the sensation of being watched growing stronger. Every part of me screamed at me to leave, to get out of this house, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't run fast enough. I felt like I was moving through water, my limbs heavy with dread. And then, as I stepped into the hallway, the lights flickered back on. The figure was gone, but the chill in the air remained. I turned toward the living room where I knew Matt would be. He'd left for a late-night shift a few hours earlier, and I hadn't been able to reach him since the monitor had gone haywire. But as I looked toward the couch, I saw the truth I didn't want to face. The baby monitor was sitting on the coffee table, and there was a new figure on the screen. A shadow, its edges flickering, moving just out of focus. I could feel its eyes on me, through the screen, through the monitor. "We've been waiting for you." In the weeks that followed, I tried everything to rid ourselves of the monitor. I tossed it in the trash. I smashed it with a hammer. I even attempted to bury it in the backyard. But every time, it reappeared. Every time, the same distorted figure would show up on the screen, waiting for me, watching me. I knew then that the horror wasn't just in the device. It wasn't in the wires or the screen. The horror was in the house, in me, in us. The baby monitor had become the gateway, a connection to something else, something dark. The entity behind the screen wasn't just a ghost or a creature. It was a force that had attached itself to us, and it had claimed Lily as its next victim. I had no choice, no options left. I contacted a specialist, someone who understood these kinds of things, someone who dealt with the unexplainable. And he confirmed what I had been dreading. The entity had latched onto Lily, feeding off her innocence. The only way to stop it was to sever the connection. Completely, the ritual was set for the next night, under the new moon. It required precise timing, the kind of timing that made me doubt its effectiveness, but I had no choice. That night, as I stood in the darkened room, my hands trembling, I felt a presence in the shadows, something waiting. I could hear the voice again, faint, almost like a murmur at the back of my mind. "You can't escape me." But as I began the ritual, the room fell silent. The presence, the voice, it faded, almost as if it were being pulled away, expelled from this world. For a moment, I thought I'd won, but the truth was that the thing behind the baby monitor wasn't gone. It was never gone. It was still watching. It was still waiting. After everything that happened, I couldn't just go back to normal. I couldn't shake the feeling that the world had shifted somehow, that the safety I once believed my home offered was nothing but an illusion. I spent weeks researching, reaching out to specialists, trying to make sense of what happened, hoping for a rational explanation that never came. But all I found were more questions, more chilling possibilities. I couldn't keep living in fear, waiting for the next whisper, the next sign that the entity was still here. The night it all began, I had been so naive, thinking a monitor was a simple way to keep an eye on my baby while I was in another room. Now, it felt like a tool of torment. I knew I had to make a decision. I sold the house. It wasn't just the monitor. It wasn't even the terror I felt creeping into every crevice of my life. It was the constant weight of fear, the way it colored every thought, every movement, every conversation. I had tried everything to rid us of the thing that was haunting us, but nothing worked. The entity had already attached itself to us, to Lily. I wasn't about to risk the same thing happening again. When we moved, I left behind everything. The baby monitor, all the technology that could have some sort of residual connection to whatever we had been dealing with. I thought that would be enough, that starting fresh in a new place, without the remnants of that nightmare, would help us heal. But even in the new house, with new walls, new furniture, I couldn't escape the feeling that it wasn't the house that needed to change. It was me. I had learned the hard way that some things can't be controlled. The world is far darker than we like to believe. Technology, something I had trusted so blindly, had betrayed me. The very thing that was meant to protect my child became the very thing that exposed us to something unimaginable. And now, as much as I wanted to protect Lily from the horrors of the world, I knew that I couldn't shield her from everything. I don't use any baby monitors anymore. I don't trust any technology that connects to the outside world. When I need to check on her while she sleeps, I just go into her room quietly, like any parent should. I sit with her, watch her breathe, and remind myself that the most important thing I can do is be present. Be vigilant. Protect her in ways that don't rely on devices. I'm still cautious. I'm still afraid. But I'm learning to accept that fear, to live with it without letting it consume me. And every night before I go to bed, I say a silent prayer, not for protection, not for safety, but for the strength to face the unknown and the wisdom to know when to let go. There's no app, no device, no screen that will ever keep my child safe. Not like I can, and that's the one thing I know for sure. I woke up with a sudden chill, my blanket tangled around my legs. The room was darker than usual, the moonlight barely peeking through the curtains. The scratching sound was the first thing I heard, distant at first, almost like someone running their fingers along the wood. My heart started pounding as I listened. It was faint, but unmistakable. Someone knew something was here. But there was no one when I turned my head, my eyes instantly fixated on the wall beside my bed. And there it was, a word carved deep into the plaster. Miriam. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. That word hadn't been there when I went to sleep. I was sure of it. My breath caught in my throat as I approached the wall, my hand trembling. The word wasn't just written on the surface. It was etched, the edges rough, as if it had been scratched by something far more vicious than a mere pencil or pen. I took a step back, my mind racing. Who was Miriam, and how had this word appeared overnight? There was a creeping sense of unease that curled at the base of my spine. My mind went into overdrive. It couldn't be real. I must have somehow missed it the night before. But that didn't explain why it felt so. Wrong, I turned to the door, intending to leave and get some fresh air. But the scratching began again, louder now, as if something or someone was trying to claw its way into the room. My stomach twisted and I froze. It was no longer just a sound. It was a message. I couldn't shake the feeling that the word Miriam was mocking me. Every time I glanced at the wall, it felt as though the letters were staring back at me, daring me to figure it out. But I wasn't sure where to start. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it some kind of twisted joke? A prank? Could I have somehow missed it the night before? No, it was impossible. That word wasn't there before. It couldn't have been. I grabbed my phone, my hands still trembling. The message from my mom was still there. I read it again. Miriam, 3rd floor, room 315. Don't forget. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. What was that supposed to mean? Who was Miriam? I had to know more. My mom hadn't sent me messages in months. I hadn't been able to process her death. How could I? And yet, here she was, sending me a cryptic message from beyond the grave. Was this a sign? Was it a warning? I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was on the verge of happening. It was like I was standing on the edge of something awful, and I was about to be pulled under. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my jacket and stepped out into the chilly night air. The streets were quiet, too quiet. My apartment was only a few blocks from the old building where I had rented a room before my mom passed away. I never thought to check the building's history, never thought that it might hold a key to whatever was happening now. As I walked down the street, the chill in the air seemed to get colder, biting at my skin. It was as though the night itself was pressing in, warning me, urging me not to go. But I had to. I had to know the truth. The building loomed ahead, tall, dark, and imposing. I'd lived there once, but never had I felt the oppressive atmosphere that now surrounded it. My heart raced as I approached the entrance. The door opened with a creak, and I stepped inside, the familiar smell of old wood and dust filling my nostrils. The lobby was empty, save for a few stray papers scattered across the floor. I walked up the creaky staircase, my footsteps echoing through the hall. When I reached the third floor, I stopped. The hallway was eerily quiet, dimly lit by the flickering light bulbs overhead. And there it was, the door to room 315. It was closed, locked, in fact. I rattled the doorknob, but it didn't budge. Frustration and fear mixed in my gut. What was going on here? I felt a sudden compulsion to knock, even though I knew no one lived in room 315. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, but nothing happened. The scratching sound I'd heard earlier seemed to echo in my mind, building in intensity until it felt like the walls themselves were alive. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Whirling around, I came face to face with an old man who looked out of place in the modern building. He wore a dusty jacket and a thick pair of glasses, his face thin and pale. His eyes, bright and unblinking, focused on me with unnerving intensity. "You're on the third floor, right?" he asked, his voice rasping. I nodded, trying not to show how shaken I was. "Listen to me, kid," he continued, taking a slow step closer. "Room 315, you don't want to mess with it. Trust me, the walls, they talk sometimes." I swallowed, trying to find my voice. "What do you mean? What's going on?" He looked around, then leaned in closer. "The walls, they don't like it when people poke around. Room 315 was sealed off years ago. Nobody lives there. Nobody should." I didn't know what to say. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he wasn't telling me. "Stay away from it," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "You don't know what's inside." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner. My breath was shallow, my heart pounding. This didn't make sense. Why was I getting so many warnings? Was room 315 somehow connected to my mother's cryptic message? And why was I being drawn to it? That night, the sound returned. The scratching, louder and more frantic than ever before. It started out faint, just a whisper at the edge of my hearing, but it quickly grew until it filled the room. My head throbbed, a dull ache that wouldn't go away. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I reached for my phone, staring at the screen for a few moments, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The message was still there, still haunting me. "Miriam." I pulled myself out of bed and walked to the wall, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. I reached out to touch the carved word. My fingers brushed the cool surface, but instead of feeling like a simple mark, it was alive, pulsing with a strange energy. My heart skipped as I felt something move beneath my fingertips, as if the wall itself were breathing. The scratching intensified, coming from somewhere deep within the plaster. I stumbled back, my breath shallow. There was something in the wall, something trying to get out. I turned to the door, but before I could take a step, I heard it, a voice. Soft, barely a whisper at first. "Miriam, Miriam, help me." The voice was faint but unmistakable, carrying a deep sense of distress. It sounded like a woman, and though I didn't recognize the name, the words felt familiar, as if they were meant for me. I froze, the hairs on my arms standing up. Was I hearing things? Was I losing my mind? The voice grew louder. "Miriam, help me," my blood ran cold. I backed away from the wall, my mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. Who is Miriam? I didn't know. I had no answers, only more questions. And with every passing second, I felt more drawn to the walls. more desperate to understand the message. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't keep ignoring the signs, pretending everything was normal. Something was wrong, and I had to confront it. I called the landlord, but he didn't answer. Of course he wouldn't. So I went back to the building. The hallway was still empty, just like the day before. When I arrived at room 315, I tried the door again, but it remained locked. Something was keeping me away from it, and I couldn't figure out why. Why did this room seem to hold such power over me? Why was I so compelled to know what was behind that door? I could feel the air growing heavier around me, as though the building itself was alive, breathing in time with my own quickening pulse. Then, I saw something in the corner of my eye. A figure. It was standing at the end of the hallway, watching me. The man from yesterday. His eyes were still cold, his expression unreadable. "You don't need to be here," he said, his voice a low rasp. "Go home. Forget about room 315. Leave it alone." I shook my head, my thoughts spinning. I couldn't leave now. I had to know. Why? What happened in that room? I asked, my voice trembling. The man didn't answer right away. He looked around, then stepped closer. "Some things are better left buried. Trust me, you don't want to uncover the past. It never lets go." Before I could ask another question, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. But his words lingered, hanging in the air like an ominous warning. The room seemed to close in around me. My chest tightened with every breath, each inhale feeling like I was suffocating. My hands trembled as I reached for the door, trying the handle again, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the door had fused with the frame, locked me in with the presence I could almost feel in the shadows. The scratching noise started again, faint at first, like a rat scurrying across the floor, but then louder, more aggressive. I pressed my back against the wall, heart hammering, and waited for something, anything, to happen. I looked around the room. There was nothing remarkable about it. Just peeling wallpaper, a dusty dresser, a mattress sagging in the corner. But everything felt wrong. The walls seemed to breathe with every shudder, every scrape that filled the air. "Miriam, help me." The voice, distorted, warped, and muffled, echoed from within the very walls themselves. I swallowed hard, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. It had to be. But as the seconds stretched, my pulse quickened and the voice didn't stop. It didn't fade away like it should have. Instead, it grew clearer, more insistent. My mother's voice was unmistakable, but twisted in ways I couldn't explain. The walls seemed to be pulsing now, like a living thing, each vibration sending chills through my spine. My head swam with dizziness. I couldn't take it anymore. In a panic, I dropped to my knees, clawing at the floor, desperately trying to find a way out. I ran my hands over the floorboards, my fingers digging into the wood like I could tear it apart. But it was hopeless. The floor was solid. The room was solid. Then, a sound like fingernails scraping across a chalkboard made me jump, jerking my head towards the wall behind me. It wasn't just the scratching now. The sound was coming from inside the wall. Something was trying to break through. Something was trapped, clawing at its prison, trying to get out. I stood up quickly, the sensation of the room shrinking around me, threatening to overwhelm my senses. I turned in a circle, frantic, searching for any escape, any way to get out of this nightmare. The door was still sealed. The windows were locked tight. And then, in the silence that followed, something I hadn't noticed before became apparent. The word Miriam was no longer on the wall, but something else had taken its place. The jagged letters were etched deeply into the surface. "Help." I staggered back, my eyes wide in horror, and for the first time, the room felt alive. The walls weren't just surrounding me, they were alive. They were closing in on me. I felt my mind unraveling. The walls were breathing. The room was pulsing. The scratches were growing louder, more desperate. My mother's voice echoed in my ears. "Miriam, help me." It wasn't my mother's voice anymore. I realized that with a sickening certainty. It was something else. Something worse. I couldn't breathe. I can't remember how much time passed after the scratching began. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. I was trapped in a kind of delirium, my thoughts fractured and slipping away. The air in the room was so thick, so suffocating, that every breath felt like I was inhaling sandpaper. I was losing my grip on reality. The scratching didn't stop. It never stopped. It only grew louder. "Miriam," the voice rasped, pulling at the corners of my sanity. "Help me," I screamed. I screamed until my throat burned, but nothing happened. The voice didn't stop. The walls didn't stop. And then I saw it from the corner of the room in the darkest shadow. Something began to emerge. At first, it was a figure, a silhouette in the dark, too indistinct to make out clearly. But it was moving slowly, deliberately. And then it spoke. "Miriam, I've been waiting for you." My breath caught in my throat as I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The figure stepped into the weak light of the room and I froze. It wasn't human. It was something else. The thing was tall, its limbs elongated, twisted like a puppet with its strings pulled too tight. Its face was featureless, an indistinct blur of shadows, but I knew it was looking at me. I could feel its gaze boring into me, consuming me. "Miriam, don't you remember me?" The voice had shifted. It was no longer a distorted version of my mother's voice. It was deeper, more sinister. My legs buckled beneath me and I sank to the floor. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But the voice, that voice, was all too familiar. It was like my mother, but wrong, so wrong. And that twisted figure was reaching out toward me, its arms stretching unnaturally. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I tried to scream again, but no sound came out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. "Miriam, you didn't listen," the thing said, its voice a whisper now, like it was inside my head. "I told you to stay away, but you had to know, didn't you? You always have to know. Now you'll never be free." With a horrific, grinding sound, the thing stepped forward, its feet dragging across the floor. The room began to spin, and I could feel the walls pressing in from all sides, their breathing quickening. It was happening. It was real. The thing was coming for me, and there was nothing I could do. I closed my eyes, praying for it to end, praying for the walls to collapse, to take me with them. But when I opened my eyes again, the thing was gone, and so was the room. The walls were silent. The scratching had stopped. The oppressive weight in the air was gone. I was back in my apartment. I was sitting on my bed, trembling, drenched in sweat. The room was still, the air normal. But then my eyes landed on the wall, and the word was there. "Miriam." The weeks passed, but the terror didn't fade. I moved out of the apartment, of course. I couldn't stay there any longer, not with what I had seen, not with that thing that had been in the room. I tried to tell myself it was all a nightmare, that it was just a hallucination caused by stress or grief. I tried to convince myself I was just losing my mind. But then I saw the message again. It wasn't just on the walls anymore, it was on my phone. "Miriam, come back." I deleted it immediately, but it kept appearing. At all hours of the day and night. Every time I thought I could escape, the message would appear again. And each time it did, I could feel the walls pressing in a little closer. The space around me seemed to close in more, just like it did that night in room 315. I don't know who or what is behind it. I don't know if it's a ghost, a memory, or something far darker. But the one thing I've learned is that there's no escape from the walls. They're always there, always waiting. And I'm beginning to wonder if they've already claimed me. Maybe, just maybe, the real horror isn't what happened that night in that room. Maybe the real horror is that the walls never let go, and neither will I. I used to laugh at people who believed in ghosts. My name's Daniel Price. I'm a pretty average guy, to be honest. I work at a hardware store in town, I drink cheap coffee, and on weekends, I hang out with my friend Mark to watch horror movies we pretend don't scare us. I live in a modest neighborhood, the kind where you wave at your neighbors, even if you don't really know them. And for most of my life, I thought the supernatural was just something bored people made up to feel like their lives meant something more. I don't laugh anymore. It started about 6 weeks ago, the night after I moved into my new place. A small, 2-bedroom house I was renting cheap after my breakup with Laura. The landlord, a wiry old man named Mr. Hale, warned me the property next door was empty. Been vacant for years, he said. Nothing but rats in there. I didn't think much of it. An empty house meant no annoying neighbors blasting music at night. Win-win, or so I thought. The first time I saw the face in the window was 3 nights after moving in. I remember it clearly, too clearly. I was sitting in the dim glow of my living room, the sound of a cheap horror flick barely registering in my mind. Mark was sitting next to me, cracking jokes, but I wasn't really paying attention. My mind was elsewhere, on the house next door. It loomed just beyond the streetlight's reach, a hulking mass of shadows and forgotten history. The kind of house that seems to breathe on its own, like it's holding its breath, waiting for something. It was around midnight when Mark finally left, his footsteps echoing down the porch as he vanished into the night. The silence settled in like an unwelcome guest, too heavy for my liking. I washed my glass at the kitchen sink, trying to push away the gnawing unease that had taken root in my chest since moving in. The house, my house, felt too quiet, too empty. The kind of quiet that presses on you, makes your skin itch. I tried to shake it off, but my pulse quickened as I glanced out the window. At first, I didn't think much of it. The house next door was pitch black, its shape barely discernible against the night sky. The blinds hung crookedly, torn and frayed at the edges like jagged teeth, broken by time and neglect. I tried not to look. I really did. But something pulled my gaze back to that window. Something in the air felt wrong, thick, suffocating. I stared harder, my breath hitching as I squinted into the darkness. And then I saw it, a face. A child's face. It was so pale, almost sickly gray, with dark, hollow eyes that seemed to stare directly at me. The face was round, too round, as if it didn't quite fit the space it occupied. I swear, for a heartbeat, I felt like time stopped. My throat went dry, the kind of dry that comes from fear, not thirst. My hands, wet from washing the glass, froze in place as the image seared itself into my mind. It was there for only a second, a flash. But that second felt like eternity. The face was gone before I could blink, vanishing behind the warped blinds like a whisper in the dark. I stood there, motionless, my heart pounding in my chest. The silence around me felt suffocating. My mind was racing, 1,000 questions swirling like a storm. What had I just seen? My rational brain tried to take control. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. Maybe it was a trick of the light, some weird play of shadows and fatigue from the late hour. Maybe it was a reflection from the streetlight, some optical illusion, but deep down, I knew. My gut screamed at me. There was no trick, no illusion. Someone had been there. Someone had been watching. I turned away from the window, my legs weak beneath me. I couldn't look back. Not yet. I tried to calm myself, to reason with the panic clawing at my chest. But it didn't work. The cold, heavy feeling that had settled in the pit of my stomach refused to leave. That night, I didn't sleep. Not a wink. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every breeze that rattled the window felt like someone was breathing down my neck. I kept my eyes fixed on the door, afraid to move, afraid to let my guard down. I couldn't shake the image of that face from my mind. The dark, sunken eyes, the pale skin. It was like it was still staring at me from somewhere, lurking just out of sight. But I told myself it was just my mind. My imagination running wild in the dead of night. I never should have told myself that. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. Sleep deprivation and stress, I told myself. Maybe I had watched too many horror movies the night before, my mind playing tricks on me. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. But as I stepped onto my porch to grab the paper, yeah, I'm one of those people. I froze. The morning light hit the yard in harsh streaks, illuminating every corner, making everything feel too bright, too exposed. But something was off. I noticed it almost immediately. A small, child-sized handprint smeared across the dirt on my car's passenger window. The print was faint, but unmistakable, tiny fingers, a little too perfect, almost as if they were pressed against the glass just recently. The dirt, streaked and discolored, looked wrong. Too deliberate, too precise. I live alone. My breath caught in my throat, a sudden tightness in my chest. I whipped my head around, scanning the street. There was nothing. No movement, no people. Just the dull hum of cicadas in the trees, the occasional creak of an old fence swaying in the breeze. The world seemed too still, too quiet. That sense of isolation hit me harder than I expected. I should have felt relief, but all I could feel was the chill creeping up my spine. I quickly grabbed the paper, trying to focus on the mundane, but the sight of that handprint kept circling in my mind. My phone vibrated in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I reached for it, hoping for some distraction, and saw it was Mark. I almost laughed when I picked up, my voice coming out too high, too tense. "You're not going to believe this," I said, trying to make light of it. There's a handprint on my car window, a little kid's handprint." Mark's laugh crackled through the phone, warm and carefree. "Dude, you need to chill," he said. "It's just some neighborhood kid messing around, probably trying to freak you out. Lock your doors." His words should have made sense, but something didn't feel right. I hung up with a weak laugh of my own, but the unease in my gut only grew. The house next door was dead silent. No lights flickered in the windows, no movement behind the curtains. It looked abandoned, like a hollow shell of a house that once lived. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching me. That night, when I lay in bed, the air felt thick and suffocating. I couldn't sleep. The darkness pressed in on me, the quiet too loud. It was then I heard it. At first, I thought I was imagining it, my mind playing tricks again. But then the sound became clearer, so clear that it felt like it was coming from inside my own skull. A soft, distant humming. A child's voice, faint but undeniable. It was a thin, high-pitched sound, tuneless and slow, like a lullaby, but there was something unsettling about it. Something wrong. The melody didn't rise and fall like a comforting lullaby. It twisted and warbled, slow and languid, sending a chill through my limbs. I lay there, frozen in the dark, my heart hammering in my chest. My skin prickled with cold, goosebumps raising along my arms, but I couldn't move. The humming continued, a rhythmic pulse through the walls, vibrating in my bones. The sound wasn't natural. It wasn't right. It was too deliberate, too eerie. It was as if it was reaching for me, something sinister hiding beneath the notes, something that didn't belong in this world. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands to my ears in a desperate attempt to block it out. But the humming wouldn't stop. It crept into my mind, echoing in the hollow spaces of my thoughts. And then, just when I thought I might scream, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. The absence of the child's humming seemed to fill the room, pressing down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I stayed there, paralyzed, afraid to move, afraid to make a sound. The room felt colder now, even though I was under the covers, my body shaking despite the warmth of the blankets. I couldn't tell if it was the fear or something else. In the suffocating silence, I realized one thing. Whatever was in that house next door, it wasn't done with me yet. I couldn't keep this to myself. The nagging feeling had been eating at me all day, gnawing away at any sense of rationality. I had to know. I had to understand what was happening, even if it meant confronting something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I had to talk to someone who might know the history of the house next door, someone who wouldn't just brush it off as paranoia. Mrs. Smith was the perfect person. She'd lived down the street for longer than I could remember, and from what I'd gathered, she knew everything about everyone in this neighborhood. The kind of person who had a piece of the past tucked into every wrinkle, every gray hair. If anyone could shed some light on what was happening, it would be her. I found her sitting on her porch in the early afternoon, a faded rocking chair creaking with every gentle push of her hands. Her cane rested against the railing, the worn wood of the handle smooth from years of use. The air was thick with the hum of cicadas, the heavy, oppressive heat clinging to everything. I stood there for a moment, the words tangled in my throat, but finally I forced myself to speak. "Mrs. Smith," I began, my voice too tight, like I was speaking from the back of my throat. "That house next door to me, did a family ever live there?" "A kid." Her reaction was immediate and chilling. Her eyes went wide, and the color drained from her face, as if I'd asked her to dig up a long-buried secret, something better left forgotten. She stiffened in her chair, her fingers tightening around the arms as if holding herself steady against the weight of some invisible force. "There was a boy," she whispered, her voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear her. Her words barely scraped past her lips, as if she feared someone might be listening. "Evan, sweet child, couldn't have been more than 8. I waited for her to continue, my heart thudding heavily in my chest, a weight pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was going to say next would change everything. "What happened?" I asked, the question slipping out of me before I could stop it. Her gaze flickered toward the house next door, a quick, anxious glance as if the walls might have ears. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she seemed to shrink into herself, the years of her life weighing heavy on her frail shoulders. "His father," she said, her voice cracking like old wood. Things weren't right in that house. Screams at night. Folks called the police a few times, but nothing ever came of it. I felt my stomach twist, my chest tightening with each word. Screams at night. The sound of it echoed in my mind, weaving through the silence of my own home. I had heard whispers, distant noises. Had I been hearing them in the dark? Had they been there all along? I swallowed hard, pushing the unease down as best as I could. "And the boy?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid to hear the answer but unable to stop myself. "Gone," she said, her voice barely audible, as if saying it aloud might somehow bring it all back. "They said they moved away, but I knew better. I saw the ambulance. No sirens, no hurry. A lump formed in my throat, lodged itself there, making it hard to breathe. My pulse quickened, thudding painfully against my rib cage as the weight of her words settled over me. There was something dark in that house, something that had been there long before I moved in. I could feel the heat of the sun on my skin, the sweat beading at the back of my neck, but it didn't matter. The air felt cold, like I had just stepped into a shadow. The neighborhood, once so peaceful, now seemed suffocating. Every rustle of the trees outside, every shift in the air, carrying a sense of unease I couldn't shake. My thoughts spiraled out of control, each one darker than the last. I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence, that the house was just another abandoned property, and that whatever was happening could be explained. But the knot in my stomach, the unease that had been building since the first time I saw that face in the window, refused to loosen. The nights grew worse. The humming had come again, softer, almost like a lullaby, but every note seemed to gnaw at my nerves. And then there were the shadows, always just at the edge of my vision, moving like something or someone was watching. But when I turned, there was nothing. Nothing but the cold, lifeless walls of the house next door. I knew then that I had crossed a line. I had opened a door I couldn't close. And whatever was in that house, whatever had been left behind, wasn't done with me. Not yet. The humming returned, that haunting, off-key lullaby, always between midnight and 3 a.m. It would start so faintly, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it grew louder, rising through the silence of the house until it seemed to pulse through the very walls. A cold shiver would crawl down my spine, and I'd find myself lying awake in the darkness, listening to it, heart racing as it reverberated through my bones. It wasn't a lullaby meant to soothe. It was the kind that twisted your insides, made your breath catch in your throat. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it crawling into my head, the rhythm repeating over and over until it became an inescapable part of the night. Then there were the taps. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, the old wood creaking under its own weight. But then it happened again and again. Soft, deliberate taps against my bedroom window. I lived on the second floor. There was no logical reason for someone to be there, yet the sound was unmistakable, like someone gently knocking, tapping their fingers against the glass. My heart would skip a beat, and I would sit up in bed, staring into the pitch-black night, waiting for the next tap to come. And it did, always at the same time when the world was at its quietest. A tap, tap, tap that seemed to beckon me into the darkness. The porch light, too, became unpredictable. It would flicker, buzz, then go out completely for long stretches, only to flash back on without warning. The dim yellow light would cast strange, erratic shadows across the yard, making the trees look like twisted figures, hunched and leaning towards me, their branches scraping against the house like claws. I'd check the bulb, adjust the switch, convinced it was a malfunction. But no matter how many times I fixed it, it always came back, spasmodic and erratic, like it had a mind of its own. But the most disturbing part wasn't the noises or the flickering light. It was the footprints. Tiny, muddy footprints, almost like they belonged to a child, always showing up on my hallway floor. I'd mopped the floor the night before, scrubbed every inch until the tiles gleamed, but the next morning, there they were, small prints, the dirt still wet, leading from the door to my bedroom. They weren't there the night before, and yet here they were, as if someone had walked through my house while I slept. I'd follow the prints, dread crawling up my throat, but they always stopped in front of my bedroom door. I began to doubt my own senses. Maybe I was just imagining it. Maybe I was losing my mind. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something was happening. And whatever it was getting closer. Then came the dreams. I don't know when it started, but I can never forget it. I'd be lying there, trapped in the depths of a dreamless sleep, when suddenly, there he was. A pale child, standing at the foot of my bed, his figure indistinct in the moonlight, as if he was both part of the shadows and something else entirely. His skin was sickly white, stretched tight over bone, and his eyes, God, his eyes. Black holes, empty and consuming. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if I was paralyzed, stuck in the nightmare with no escape. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His mouth opened wider, and I could see the dark hollow of his throat, as if he were trying to speak, to say something to me. But the words didn't matter. Nothing mattered except his presence, that cold, hollow presence that seemed to fill the entire room. The closer he got, the colder the air became. The temperature in my room dropped so rapidly, I could see my breath, heavy and misty in the air. My skin went clammy, goosebumps rising on my arms despite the stifling summer heat. I could feel his cold, damp hand as it reached for me, its fingers brushing against my wrist, icy, clammy, and so real. Every time I woke, it was the same. I gasped for breath, my body drenched in sweat, but my skin felt chilled, frozen. My room was always colder than it should have been, like the very air itself was contaminated by whatever had been in that dream. I'd lie there, trembling, trying to convince myself it was just a dream, a trick of my mind, but I knew it wasn't. I could still feel his fingers on my wrist. I could still feel the icy grip as if it had left an imprint on me. I couldn't sleep after that. I didn't want to. But even when my eyes were shut tight, trying to block out the visions, the humming would start again, low and eerie, winding its way into my consciousness. The tap, tap, tap against the window would return, and I'd be trapped, lying wide awake, unable to escape whatever had been following me. Mark didn't believe me, of course. "Bro, you need to lay off the horror marathons," he joked. "You're freaking yourself out." But one night, curiosity got the better of him. "All right, let's go in there," he challenged, holding up a flashlight. "Let's debunk this." I wish I'd stopped him. We crossed the overgrown yard just past midnight, the air thick and heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. The grass was knee-high, wild and tangled, brushing against our legs with an unsettling sense of familiarity, as if it had been waiting to catch us. The porch sagged under our weight, its creaking groan echoing through the silent night like a warning. The house loomed in front of us, its silhouette barely discernible against the moonless sky, as if it had been swallowed whole by the darkness. The front door was sealed with rusty chains and a thick padlock, the metal rusted and worn like the house itself. But I knew there was another way in. I wasn't sure what had possessed me to go this far, but something deep within urged me on, dragging Mark along with me. My hand trembled as I brushed aside the shattered remnants of the window, the glass crunching beneath my fingers. We crawled through the jagged opening, the cold night air biting at our skin, and as soon as we were inside, the temperature dropped dramatically. The air inside was heavy, thick with mildew and rot. It clung to my lungs, each breath like inhaling stale water. My throat burned. The smell of decay was overpowering, sinking into every inch of the room, wrapping itself around us like a suffocating shroud. Moonlight slanted through the gaps in the boarded-up windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The faint glow illuminated a broken couch, its upholstery torn and frayed, and a ceiling that had collapsed in several places. Water stains marred the walls, their shapes twisted and grotesque, resembling screaming faces frozen in agony. Each step we took made the floor groan beneath us, a sound so loud it seemed to echo throughout the entire house, making my heart race faster, the tension in my chest tightening with every movement. We made our way upstairs, each step more tentative than the last, the stairs creaking as if they, too, were warning us to turn back. But we didn't. I didn't know why we kept going. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe the sense that we were already too far gone to stop now. As we reached the top, the cold pressed in even harder, seeping through the walls, chilling me to the bone. It was like stepping into a tomb, a place frozen in time. And then we reached the room. The door creaked open with a sound that made my blood run cold, as if the house itself was protesting our intrusion. And when we stepped inside, I was hit by an overwhelming sense of wrongness. The room was a child's room, once bright and warm, now decayed and forgotten. Faded wallpaper clung to the walls, depicting smiling bears and balloons, but the colors had long since faded into an almost sickly yellow, like the memories had been erased. In the corner, a decayed crib lay half-collapsed, its wood splintered and rotted, and scattered around the floor were toys, their bright colors bleached by time, their edges chipped and cracked. But the thing that struck me the most, what made the air feel even heavier, was the far wall. There, smeared in what I could only guess was dried blood, was a single word: stay. It was jagged, sloppy, as though it had been written in haste, smeared across the wall by trembling, desperate hands. My heart skipped a beat, a tight knot forming in my stomach. I glanced at Mark, hoping for some sign of reassurance, but I saw it in his eyes, the same fear that was starting to creep up my spine. His bravado from earlier was gone, replaced by the unease that seemed to settle in the room itself. He was shaking, though he was trying to hide it, and his voice was strained as he muttered, "Okay, let's bounce, man. This is messed up." I nodded, my stomach tight with anxiety. But before we could make our way back to the window, the door slammed shut behind us. The sound was so sudden, so violent, that it rattled through my bones. Mark's flashlight flickered, the beam jumping erratically before going completely dark. My pulse thundered in my ears as I fumbled for the switch, but the light wouldn't come back on. Then, the humming began. It started faint, like a soft lullaby, its melody fractured, broken. It was like the sound of a music box playing underwater, the notes distorted and muffled, haunting in its eeriness. I could feel it, pressing on my chest, suffocating me, like the air itself had turned thick with the sound. I tried to ignore it, tried to move, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The humming, no, the song grew louder, closer, filling the room. I turned to Mark, but he was already frozen, staring wide-eyed at something behind me. His mouth opened, but no words came out. And then I saw it. A pale face, half hidden behind the crib, staring at us. Its eyes were black. No, not black, but bottomless, like voids that swallowed everything in their path. I swear, it wasn't a trick of the light, wasn't my mind playing games with me. There was a child, standing there, watching us, its mouth opening, though no sound came out. Its skin was sickly white, stretched tight over bone, its form almost translucent in the dim light. Mark screamed, the sound tearing through the silence like a jagged knife, and I grabbed him, pulling him toward the window, urging him to move, to run. But we were too late. The window was still there, but the world outside had changed. The yard, the trees, everything looked wrong, as if the very landscape had warped in those few seconds. I didn't care. I didn't think. I pulled Mark out of the window, scrambled over the sill, and didn't stop running until we were halfway down the block, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding like we'd just outrun death itself. But I could still hear the humming, even as I ran. Even as I stumbled through the darkness, I could still hear it, soft and broken, calling me back. We never spoke of it after. Mark moved to another town 2 weeks later. He won't answer my calls, and me. I'm still here. Because I can't leave, you see, something followed me back that night. The humming hasn't stopped. Every night, without fail, it comes. The soft, eerie tune rising from my walls. I see fleeting shadows, cold hands brushing my cheek as I sleep. I've tried everything. Salt lines, prayers, moving furniture, but it only gets worse. The thing isn't in the house next door anymore. It's in mine. I called Mrs. Smith again last week, desperate for answers. She told me something that still makes my skin crawl. Some say, she whispered, if you see Evan's face, if you hear his song, it means he's chosen you. He only sings for the ones he wants to keep. I haven't slept since. People ask why I don't just move. Burn the house down. Call a priest. I've tried. But every time I leave, I find myself waking up in my own bed. The same decayed walls, the same flickering lights. It's like the house won't let me go. Or maybe it's not the house. Maybe it's him. And tonight the humming started early. It's getting closer. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Life was supposed to be mundane. Or at least, that's what I always told myself when I found myself caught in the monotony of another dreary day. My name is Emma, and like most people, I went through the motions. I woke up at 7 a.m., had the same black coffee from the same cracked mug, and trudged through my workday as if I were on autopilot. Nothing ever changed, and I thought that was fine. Stability was safety, but one evening, everything changed. It started with an old mirror. I had been at a yard sale when I saw it. Tucked away in a corner, covered with a dusty sheet like some forgotten relic of a time long past, it stood out to me. Its frame was ornate, but chipped in places, the gold paint faded almost entirely. I don't know why I was drawn to it, but I was. Maybe it was the way it seemed almost out of place, or the curiosity of it. I asked the old woman running the sale about it. She looked at me with tired, sunken eyes, as though I had asked about some old family heirloom. "Take it if you want it," she said, her voice raspy. "It's just taking up space, but I'll warn you, child, mirrors like these don't always show what you expect." I thought she was joking. The woman was clearly a little off, perhaps losing her grip on reality. Who would want a cracked old mirror anyway? But for reasons I still can't fully explain, I bought it. It was cheap, and I thought I could use it as a decoration, or maybe refurbish it. It was something to do when I got home. I placed the mirror on my bedroom wall, where it caught the light in a strange way. I didn't think much of it at first. For days, it hung there, reflecting the ordinary details of my life. But then, it began to change. It started small, a flicker in the glass, a brief distortion, like an image that had been spliced and then patched back together. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or maybe my eyes playing games on me after a long day. But then, one night, I saw something. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As I stood in front of it brushing my hair, I noticed something was off. The reflection of my bedroom seemed darker. The shadows in the corners were deeper, more pronounced. And the bed, which I clearly remembered having neat sheets on, was now slightly disheveled, as if someone had been sitting there. I turned to look behind me. The bed was pristine, the way I had left it. It was subtle, this shift, just a feeling at first, but I couldn't shake it. The next few nights, I caught glimpses of the same thing, changes in the reflection. There were times when I'd look into the glass and something would feel wrong. The shape of the furniture, the way the light played against the walls, even the texture of the carpet, it was all off, just a little. I didn't know how to explain it, but I felt as though the mirror was somehow showing me a different version of my room. A version that wasn't now, but maybe later. At first, I brushed it off. It wasn't until a week later, when something far more chilling happened, that I began to realize the mirror wasn't just showing me random reflections. It was showing me the future. It started innocently enough. One evening, as I prepared for bed, I looked into the mirror. It was late, the moonlight filtering through my curtains and casting a pale glow across the room. I stared at my reflection, lost in thought. The mirror had been bothering me, but I had chalked it up to fatigue. After all, who could blame me for imagining things? I'd been working long hours and barely slept. That's when I saw it. In the reflection, I was standing in my bedroom, staring back at myself, just as I was now. But something was different. My reflection looked distant, as if I were already halfway to a place far beyond my room. In the glass, I saw myself reach for the doorknob to leave the room. The odd thing was, I wasn't wearing the clothes I had on at that moment. I was wearing a sweater and jeans, completely different from my current outfit of pajamas. And then, the reflection's face changed. It was subtle, just a flicker, but it happened. My own face, my expression, transformed like a veil lifted. I didn't recognize myself anymore. The person staring back was a stranger, someone with wild eyes and a twisted smile. A sickly feeling crawled up my spine as I looked back, but no one was there. My room was silent. I didn't move, frozen in place, staring at the mirror for what felt like hours. It happened the next day. I was at work when the event from the mirror unfolded before my eyes, just as I'd seen it. The door to my office, which I had no intention of opening, creaked slightly, as if inviting me to leave. The hairs on my neck stood up. My reflection from the night before, the one with the different clothes and the twisted face, began to replay in my head like a broken record. My hand, like it had in the mirror, reached out toward the door, and I felt an odd, overwhelming compulsion to go. But I stopped myself. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. The days blurred into each other, and the feeling of dread I'd been ignoring became harder to dismiss. I couldn't shake the sensation that the mirror was controlling me, or worse, manipulating me. That first day, when the events of the mirror unfolded in real life, was just the beginning. At first, I told myself it was just a strange coincidence. People go through phases where they feel like they've experienced something before. Deja vu. But deep down, I knew this wasn't deja vu. This was something different. The mirror wasn't just showing me random, distorted versions of reality. It was showing me events that would happen, and I was helpless to stop them. The next time I stared into the mirror, I thought I had prepared myself. I expected the reflection to do something, show me something, and I was ready to take control. But I was wrong. What I saw made my heart stop. It was me, standing by the window in my living room. I was staring out at the street, watching something outside. I couldn't tell what it was at first. The reflection zoomed in on my face, and I saw the look in my eyes, fear. Then the reflection moved, my hand slowly reaching for something on the table next to me. I couldn't move. I was watching the reflection play out in real time. And just as the image in the mirror reached for the object, I felt my body begin to mirror it, my own hand moving toward the same object. But that's when it struck me. The object wasn't anything ordinary. It was a knife, the same knife I had used just the week before to chop vegetables. Before I could stop myself, my fingers were wrapped around the handle of the knife, cold steel digging into my skin. It felt wrong. Like I wasn't in control anymore, like something else was guiding me. I jerked back, terrified by the sight. But it wasn't over. As I watched in horror, the reflection of me lifted the knife slowly, staring at it like a stranger would. As if trying to understand what it meant, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to know what the next part of the prophecy was. I could feel it coming, an inevitability that weighed down on me like a heavy stone. But it was too late. The image in the glass flickered and changed again, this time faster, like a reel skipping forward. The next thing I saw was my own face, bloodied, lifeless, staring at me from the reflection. I backed away from the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. Sweat poured down my neck, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my phone. But when I looked down at the screen, I could see it clearly now. I was not in control of this. It was the mirror. It was showing me things that hadn't happened yet, things I couldn't change. And I knew deep down that I had no choice but to follow its lead. I tried everything. I turned away from the mirror. I covered it up. I even tried to destroy it. But no matter what I did, the visions came. Each night, I would sit in front of the mirror, watching as the next horrifying scene unfolded before my eyes. Each time, I saw something worse. My future was already written in glass, and I couldn't escape it. It wasn't long before I stopped sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the mirror in my mind's eye, showing me a version of the future I didn't want. I had to know, could I change it? Could I stop the things that I saw? Could I ever truly escape the mirror's grip? I began to avoid looking at it, but the future kept finding me. One morning, I woke up with an undeniable sense of urgency. Something in the mirror had shown me a moment that felt too close, too real. I had seen myself driving down the road, my reflection smiling, a serene expression on my face, but something was off. The image of me was calm, too calm, and I could see a red car pulling up behind me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen, but I didn't know what. That afternoon, I went about my usual routine, but the eerie feeling of the mirror's prediction hovered over me like a dark cloud. I tried to ignore it, but as I walked to my car, I saw the same red car from the mirror pulling up behind me. My heart skipped a beat. Was I losing my mind? Or was it really happening? Was this the moment when I became a puppet to fate's cruel strings? I couldn't help myself. I turned to look, locking eyes with the driver of the car. A man in his late 40s, a calm smile on his face, waved. Something about him seemed familiar. And then the flash of recognition hit me. I had seen him in the mirror. That was the man who would end up hurting me. I felt my stomach drop. The reflection hadn't lied. It wasn't just some coincidence. It had been right all along. I was powerless to change my future. It was already decided. I rushed back inside, the overwhelming weight of the situation sinking in. I had no choice but to confront the mirror again. The weight of it all hit me with a wave of suffocating dread. I couldn't breathe properly. The mirror had controlled me, my every decision, every movement. It showed me things that hadn't happened yet, things I couldn't possibly have known. But I had seen the future, and now I had to face it head on. No more running, no more waiting for the inevitable. I couldn't let the mirror dictate my life any longer. It had been haunting me for days, showing me terrifying glimpses of a future that felt more and more like a curse than a blessing. I couldn't go on living like this, wondering when the next horror would unfold in front of me. I felt like I had to do something drastic, something permanent. The mirror couldn't have all the answers. It couldn't be allowed to keep me trapped in its reflection. Standing in front of the mirror, I tried to calm my mind. My heart was still racing, my pulse quickening with each breath I took. I could feel the mirror's presence. It was more than just an object in my room now. It was a part of me, a part of my life. Its reflections had become my reality, and I couldn't escape them. I felt like it was watching me, knowing exactly what I was about to do, anticipating my every move. "Show me," I whispered, my voice trembling, my body rigid with fear. I was tired of being afraid. I had to confront it. The mirror had shown me my fate for too long, but this time I wasn't going to let it control me. I needed to see what it would reveal. And maybe, just maybe, I could change it. I didn't know if I was ready for what would happen next, but I couldn't back down. The mirror flickered to life. The first image appeared, and it was exactly what I had feared. The same red car, the same man sitting in the driver's seat. He was smiling that same calm, unsettling smile, the one I had seen in my reflection so many times. It was almost like déjà vu, but worse. It wasn't just a memory, it was my future. And this time, I wasn't just watching, I was participating. I could feel the weight of the mirror's pull, like invisible strings tugging at my body, making me move in sync with the reflection. My body began to mirror the motions of my reflection. I reached for the door handle, exactly as I had seen myself do before. But this time, I stopped myself. The door was within my reach. I could open it. I could get in the car and let the man take me, let him drag me into whatever fate awaited me. Or I could refuse. I could fight it. I could make a choice for myself. For the first time in days, I felt the power of my own will. I slammed the door shut, jerking back, away from the mirror. The reflection in the glass stuttered. The image of the man in the car flickered and distorted, like a glitch in a video game. His smile twisted, becoming grotesque and unnatural. His features seemed to melt away, replaced by a dark, shadowy blur that hovered in the background. I saw my reflection for a split second, but it wasn't me anymore. It was something different, something darker, something unrecognizable. The mirror shattered, I heard it. The loud crack of glass splintering. I didn't flinch as the pieces fell to the floor, scattering in every direction. I couldn't hear the usual voice that had always accompanied the images in the mirror. No whispers, no soft hum of inevitability. The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the faint sound of glass tinkling on the floor. I was breathing heavily, my chest tight with panic, but a strange feeling settled inside me. I wasn't sure whether it was relief or something else, something darker, something I couldn't quite place. I had broken the mirror. It was shattered, torn apart by my own hand. And with it, I had broken the chain that had kept me in that endless loop of fate. I thought I was free. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a gnawing unease deep in my gut, like I was constantly on the edge of some terrible discovery. The world seemed quieter somehow, more still. The absence of the mirror's presence in my life left a gaping hole, a silence that threatened to swallow me whole. But I couldn't deny it. I was scared. Scared of what I had done. Scared that I had done nothing at all. I had destroyed the mirror, but I hadn't destroyed the power it had over me. It was like I was living in a fog, moving through a world that felt different, but still exactly the same. And worse, I felt a strange pull, like the mirror wasn't truly gone, like it had just moved on to someone else or something else. Perhaps it was always just a tool in the hands of something darker. I avoided mirrors after that. I couldn't bear to look into one and see that familiar glint of fate peering back at me. It was as though the universe had given me a reprieve, a brief moment of freedom before it would inevitably come back around. I couldn't shake the fear that I was being watched. The feeling followed me everywhere, in every reflective surface, in every glass pane, or still body of water. Days turned into weeks, and still, I felt the weight of the future pressing down on me. I found myself looking over my shoulder, expecting to see something. The feeling of being haunted didn't leave me. It lingered in the back of my mind, like a distant whisper that refused to be silenced. It wasn't until one night, as I walked home from the store, that I felt it again. The car, the same red car. I could hear the low rumble of the engine behind me, and I knew without looking who it was. The same man from the mirror. I could hear his car pulling up beside me, the tires crunching on the gravel. I couldn't help myself. I turned, almost against my will, and there he was, his face calm, his smile perfect. The man was real, and the events I had seen in the mirror weren't just predictions. They were warnings. And just as quickly as it started, the car drove off, fading into the night. I didn't follow it. I couldn't. I was paralyzed, my feet frozen to the ground. I wasn't sure if it was him or if it was all just some strange coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. The mirror hadn't shown me everything. It had only shown me enough to keep me trapped in its web. I was living the aftermath of its control. The future had never really been mine to change. I was only a player in a game much bigger than I could ever understand. And though I had destroyed the mirror, I hadn't escaped its grasp. The future would come for me, with or without its help. The one thing I learned was this: some fates can't be outrun. And some mirrors only show you what you were always going to face. It wasn't freedom. It was just another kind of prison. As always, thanks for listening.